Thank you very much. For those who don't know, my name is Chris Hintz with Fortinet. I am a Director of Product and Solutions, focusing on our wireless offering here. And to kick things off, we always like to do a little bit of sort of what's new at Fortinet, catching up with the company, because maybe this is the first time you've watched one of our presentations, as well as to tell you what's happened since the last Mobility Field Day, because we rarely sit still. But because we've been here, I don't really have to go through all of this word by word. You already know that we're the #1 cybersecurity company in the world. We're basically leading in the most deployed units. We're the most validated. When it comes to security, we're usually the most patented. We have the broadest portfolio. And because you've heard me talk about this several times, you know that we sort of view the security landscape as billions of edges that need to be secured. And when it comes to the network, we recognize that Wi-Fi is one of those most prominent edges. And so you can actually see Wi-Fi called out very explicitly in our attack diagram. And that's a big reason why Fortinet has historically been very involved in Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi equipment, because it does represent a security interface in a place that most people connect to modern networks. Now, I've talked about our security fabric the last couple of years, so I'm not necessarily going to take you through one by one of the security fabric. But I always like to point out that, again, when you look at our kind of vision, what we talk about for our portfolio, you can see secure WLAN and LAN sits right here at the top level. So it is a key piece of what we believe we're doing. And we're very proud of the broad set of products that we offer to mitigate risk across the portfolio, how they all integrate together. And you're going to see and hear more about that today in some of our presentations, and the automated way in which they can respond to the needs of the network admin as well as to security threats. Now, one thing that's a little bit new, and I want to spend a little bit more time talking about, is to help people sort of understand everything that's within our fabric. We've kind of broken this up into specific pillars. As an example, a lot of the things to help identify and secure users or devices, we've lumped that into a pillar that we call Zero Trust Network Access. So for example, if you went to a web page and you went into that category, that's where you'd find those things. Wireless is part of our security-driven networking, because if you think about it, that's exactly what we are delivering. We are delivering network equipment that is being driven in a security context by our industry-leading FortiGate. So as we drive in a little bit about the idea of this, the idea is to really converge everything together into a security context. We don't like the idea, and I know I've used this phrase multiple times, but it's really, if you listen to either our founders talk or when they write articles, they hate the idea of the network existing and then someone just bolting on security from the edge. That's not what they believe in. They really believe in the network being part of the overall security context. We're very unique in this way. You don't see any other people that have their security offerings so closely married to their networking offering. Even people who have some of the same pieces in their portfolio don't have the level of integration. And we're going to be reminding everybody about that later today as we go through some of the pieces of our agenda. Now, last year I got called out a little bit, and Sam actually did me the credit of underhand pitching me the question to get me back on track. We do have a lot of Forti names and a lot of Forti nomenclature that we use. And so what you may hear sprinkled through our presentations today is the idea of FortiLink. FortiLink is basically our marketing name for the actual way that our FortiGate and our FortiAPs and FortiSwitch communicate with each other. So it's mainly a protocol and it's a means of communication. It's a marketing concept in which we make that integrated security happen. You'll see this today, and you may remember it from previous years, that this is what allows a wireless SSID to show up as an actual firewall interface in the FortiGate. And it can therefore have anything applied to it that you would apply to a normal firewall interface within that FortiGate. It also drives a lot of our simplicity because you don't need to learn a bunch of new UI stuff. And it's very flexible because I just add an AP, the gate's going to find it. It's going to all get brought on very simply and easily. And one last thing, I know that I become a bit of a broken record about this every year, but I think it is important to call out because the industry seems to be moving in a direction where you have to pay for everything. You have to buy a license in order to get the right to subscribe to the subscription, which then gives you access to the other piece of the license where that you have to purchase to get the product that enables the feature you want. We don't do that here. FortiLink is built into FortiOS, and FortiOS is the operating system that runs on the FortiGate. It's always enabled. You don't have to pay a license to turn it on. There's no licenses required to put an AP onto that FortiGate. The capacity of a FortiGate is completely determined by the model of FortiGate that you're looking to buy. We're going to talk a little bit more about that during one of our later sessions because we've actually made some nice increases in those of late. So, okay, that's kind of the background information. Always like to level set a little bit for the new folks among us. But what's new? This is the thing that's most interesting to everybody. The things, unfortunately, that's new is the reason this is all virtual. And I'm not sharing this room with all the delegates, and that is the reality that we're currently living in with COVID. And one of the first responses that Fortinet did with that is we realized that this was a real opportunity for people, particularly in the IT space, to up-level their skill set. Potentially they had been impacted by some of what's going on and they would like to increase their marketability. And so we have made the NSC Institute access free. This will be free through the remainder of 2020. And these are full courses are from the official network security expert curriculum. So this is our direct courses. This isn't like a secondary set. This comes straight from the NSC Institute. This allows people to become familiar with topics like SD-WAN or security, secure web gateway, as well as our wired and wireless solutions. So they can become experts in these technologies and potentially come out of this whole experience of 2020 with an increased skill set. On the product side of the house, we do a lot of things in the course of a year. So I'm going to try and focus on those things that I think have direct applicability to what you would see in, say, a mobile environment. One of those is FortiEDR. We picked up a company by the name of Ensilo since the last Mobility Field Day, and they have been rebranded, and I'm sure nobody is terribly surprised, as FortiEDR. Now, what's kind of cool about FortiEDR is it's different from some of the other EDR technologies. So all EDR sort of operates under the assumption that your endpoint will inevitably get compromised. And so you need visibility into these things. Well, we not only provide that visibility, but we can actively do something about it. We can detect suspicious process behavior, and then we can actively block that malicious action. We can also block outbound communication, as well as file tampering and encryption. And, you know, I talked earlier about the security fabric and what a lot of these things in terms of the communication between all our products enables. And what that also means with something like FortiEDR is if it detects a compromised endpoint and it sees, say, an IP address that now this malware is trying to phone home to, it can not only block that on the endpoint, it can pass that information up to, say, the FortiGate. And the FortiGate can be pushing back down to my wireless endpoints. So now the entire network is aware that this IP address is associated with bad actors and shouldn't be trusted. And then we had some late breaking news that kind of happened after I had gotten most of this deck ready. So we did acquire a company by the name of Opaque. Just last week, we announced that they are, you know, the newest buzzword in the security space is SASE, and they have some components of an overall SASE solution. And the main reason that Fortinet has done that is because we really believe in choice. I think people have heard me talk about this in regards to the wireless, and I'll touch on it again in a little bit. We really like people to be able to have whatever architecture they want, not have to be forced into the particular architecture that Fortinet believes in. And this further fleshes out and gives lots of options for how people consume security and how they provide security. And it's a nice marriage for our existing secure SD-WAN solutions to have an overall solution for the access edge. But of course, we're all here today to talk about the wireless, which is, as I said earlier, part of security-driven networking. So let's look at what we've done within that space. Folks may remember that at last year's Mobility Field Day, I talked quite a bit about secure SD branch. And we've been really pretty excited over this time to watch that our vision of secure SD branch, the idea that you don't just want SD-WAN, you also need a firewall tied into that because you now have the internet piped into your location, and that your wired and wireless networks should be tied intimately into that overall security framework has started being picked up by a lot of other vendors. And that what we are seeing in this space is more and more people moving to the exact architecture that we touted at Mobility Field Day a year ago. But we haven't just been sitting on those laurels. We've done a lot of extensive work to increase our SD-WAN orchestration capabilities with a lot of new features that came out earlier this calendar year along those lines. Now, while today I'm going to focus pretty heavily in terms of our presentation on the FortiAP when controlled by a FortiGate, we do, for that flexibility I was talking about, also allow for FortiAPs to be managed by a cloud interface, which is named FortiAP Cloud. Again, we like the idea that our customers have the flexibility to drive and manage in any way they want. That UI was completely revamped earlier this calendar year. Now, we were going to show that, but with time constraints, we wanted to ensure that we really focused on those things we thought the most questions would be about. So there are some new videos up on our website. Anybody who's curious about that UI can go check it out. There's a great demo that you can actually self-drive around and see how that looks.
Can I ask you a question, Chris?
Certainly.
So before you get too deep into this, do you have a significant customer base that uses Fortinet wireless and other people's switching, or how much of the customer base is full stack Fortinet? Just trying to get reference as we proceed.
I don't have direct percentages at my fingertips of people running the full 40 stack, but when we look at these things, it's not at all uncommon for someone to say have switches in place that they're already utilizing, but say their wireless is up for refresh, and they do have a FortiGate, that's maybe their firewall that they're using on the site, and they just plug in the wireless for now, and they leave the switches for a future time. Maybe they'll move to us in the future. Maybe those switches will be good for them for another 5 to 7 years, and they may not touch them. That is not at all uncommon. And we've even seen where, to the point of the FortiAP Cloud, where people really like the ability to just cloud manage our APs because their access points are again up for refresh, but maybe the firewall isn't yet, neither is the switching, but they've become convinced of the overall story of the security fabric. And remember, one bit of flexibility that we have, and I swear I should be paying you, Lee, because you tee wonderful things up for me every time. One of the bits of flexibility that we have is the same AP that can be managed by FortiAP Cloud can be managed by a FortiGate. And I can think of one large customer, and I don't think that I can say them by name, unfortunately, who purchased a large number of FortiAPs. They're using the cloud management right now because their budget cycle wasn't such that they could touch the firewalls. But their plan is, within the next year or two, that budget cycle will be up. They're planning to move to FortiGates, and this allowed them a perfect thing to use their wireless budget to buy the APs they wanted, stack up for the future. When the gates come in, it's very simple. Those same APs, they don't have to be touched, they don't have to be moved. You get pointed to a FortiGate, the FortiGate adopts them, and they're off and running. So it's a really nice methodology to make a smooth transition between technologies. What you'll see a lot of our presentations centered around today is FortiOS. Now, FortiOS, as I mentioned earlier, that's the operating system that actually runs on our FortiGate appliance. Every year we have a major release that has more features than I can count in it. A lot of them security focused. I'm not even going to attempt to go through all of them or list all of them. I do have a session coming up where I will have one of our Fortinet employees by the name of Sumant who will go through some of the most applicable ones. But just to give you an idea of what you're going to see, a sneak preview, as it were, we have some new UI elements to make it easier, as well as some new troubleshooting tools. A lot of these are things that we always have the capability of, but we're now really bringing it to the forefront based upon some feedback that we've had from users. And finally, last year, you may remember that I talked about FortiWLM and gave the reveal that this wireless LAN management tool that had historically been tied to our standalone controller offering was now being bridged across and would run off of our standard FortiGate offering as well. So we've continued the enhancements along those lines to ensure that that marriage is as tight as possible, as well as the integration into our Fabric Management Center so that, and I know people sometimes scoff at this buzzword, but we do want to ensure that there's a single pane of glass, at least for the stack. So that is our Fabric Management Center. It handles anything that is Fortinet enabled. And this would allow you to, of course, bring in that same FortiWLM into that same overall ecosystem without having to log into multiple systems.
I've got one quick question, Chris.
Please, Mitch.
And forgive me if this is just because you were focused on the FortiAP cloud and the FortiGate management, but just you leaving out the controller-based solution, is that just because of the focus right here, or is there still plans to continue the controller-based solution, or where does that stand?
Good question, Mitch. I think what you are going to see through the rest of the next, say, 9 to 12 months is us move away from the standalone controller slowly. We really want to refocus those efforts strongly on what we can do with the FortiGate. And we really want to get to a level where every AP we are producing can be used across all the different management possibilities we have, which those who are aware of our different portfolios knew that the controller sadly was an outlier in that regard. It could only handle some APs. And so after kind of looking at these and weighing our options, we'd rather refocus that engineering effort to some other location. So you will see us start to move away from the dedicated controller platform.